This is my diary from my mid-20s. I wrote about my husband, my adorable children, my friends, but the thing that I wrote about most often was patriarchy. I was so devout in my church. I was so earnest in my desire to do what God wanted me to do. I so did not want to make problems. But I just kept noticing the hierarchy of men over women. And this journal is full of gut-wrenching wrestling with scripture and social norms. I was terrified and so alone. And I would often find myself sobbing in my car or in my closet, wondering if I was the only one that felt that way. And if I ever brought it up, I was told that I was wrong. Either because patriarchy didn't exist anymore, so I was making it up, or because patriarchy did exist, but it was God's will, and it was the natural order of things, so there was nothing wrong with it. Then finally, after about 15 years of anguish, I discovered the work of Gerda Lerner. In her book, The Creation of Feminist Consciousness, she says, men develop ideas and systems of explanation by absorbing past knowledge and critiquing and superseding it. Women, ignorant of their own history, did not know what women before them had thought and taught. So generation after generation, they struggled for insights others had already had before them in an endless repetition of effort, the constant reinventing of the wheel. As I read the rest of this book, I discovered that she was right. Women had been crying and wrestling and struggling for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they had been writing it down the whole time. But there I was, reinventing the wheel in my journal, just like thousands of women before me, because women's history still isn't taught. So today, I'm going to introduce you to 3 groundbreaking women that I had not known about until recently. First is a woman who lived in what we now call Germany from 1098 until 1179, Hildegard von Bingen. Hildegard was a very spiritual little kid, and when she was 8 years old, her parents took her to a monastery to become a nun. Locking a child away in a monastery seems like questionable parenting now, but keep in mind that during the Middle Ages, most girls were married off in their teens, and they spent the entire rest of their lives having babies and managing an unending amount of daily labor. Monasteries were places where girls could opt out of the responsibilities of marriage, motherhood, and housework, and could actually become really educated and enjoy a decent amount of sovereignty. This was the case for Hildegard, who learned to read and compose music, and she ended up corresponding with popes and emperors and led large groups of educated, productive women. In the year 1141, Hildegard received what she believed was a vision from God that told her to write down what she saw and heard. And in response, she produced 3 great volumes of visionary theology, a variety of musical compositions, a musical morality play, one of the largest bodies of letters to survive from the Middle Ages, including records of many of the sermons she preached in the 1160s and 70s, 2 volumes of material on natural medicine and cures, and an invented language. At the beginning of her life, Hildegard referred to herself as God's little trumpet, and she spoke in very self-effacing terms because of her gender. By the end of her life, though, she painted herself almost like a prophet, writing on 2 tablets like Moses, with rays of inspiration coming down from heaven into her head. Lerner writes, this self-conscious self-representation may very well be the first of its kind for a woman. Wishing to be remembered in her own right, she became the first female inspired by mystical revelation to claim her place in history. Sadly, though, had you ever heard of Hildegard von Bingen? Was her work published and taught so that subsequent generations of women could benefit from her wisdom in the same way that Newton laid the foundations for Einstein? The second woman we're going to talk about was born in Venice in the year 1364, and her name was Christine de Pisan. Christine was born into a well-to-do family. Her mother thought that it would be a total waste of time for Christine to learn how to read, but her father encouraged her to learn as much as she could, reading in Greek and Latin, and in particular, studying history. So she read the works of the Greek philosophers and the early Christian church fathers. Note, remember what those Greek philosophers and early Christian fathers thought about women.
For the female is, as it were, a mutilated male.
It is improper for a woman to speak in an assembly, no matter what she says, even if she says admirable things or even saintly things. That is of little consequence since they come from the mouth of a woman.
At the age of 15, Christine married a man who encouraged her literary pursuits, and by all accounts, they were very happy. But her husband died of the plague in 1389, so at the age of 25, Christine was widowed, without income, and faced with her husband's debts. She supported herself, her mother, and her 3 young children by copying and producing books, illustrating books, even doing the work of a notary, all while making her own reputation as a writer. She lived her life out in the world, engaged in the court and politics, and she was soon recognized as a poet and even received a commission to write the biography of King Charles V. Things got controversial when she attacked a popular book for its misogyny. This led to an exchange of letters with some of the leading male humanists of the time, and that started a debate on the status of women. This debate evolved into a public conversation called the Querelle des Femmes, or the woman question. These public conversations lasted for 3 centuries and paved the way for European women to question the patriarchal systems that governed their lives. But what Christine is most remembered for, if she's remembered at all, is the book of the City of Ladies. One day, Christine was reading some of the misogynistic comments that were being circulated at the time, and she began to wonder how it happened that so many different men are so inclined to express so many wicked insults about women. She was deeply hurt by their words, and as she thought about her own life and the women that she actually knew, she became angry that she had internalized a negative view of women based on men's degrading and dehumanizing comments. She wrote that in believing negative things about women, she had been relying more on the judgments of others than what she herself felt and knew. Gerda Lerner says, "Here, for the first time in the written record, we have a woman defining the tension that every thinking woman has experienced between male authority denying her equality as a person and her own experience." Christine was so struck by this epiphany that she was swept up in a vision where 3 ladies appeared to her. The first one was Lady Reason, who explained to her that she had been selected to vanquish from the world the error into which she had fallen, i.e., the error of internalized misogyny. Lady Reason told her that she had been entrusted with the task of building a city of ladies, where all valiant women might find refuge from attacks and slander. The 2 other ladies, Lady Rectitude and Lady Justice, would also help her in that task. Christine asked the 3 women to explain to her why so many men had been so horrible to women. The ladies offered various explanations, and Christine wrote down the dialogue in the Book of the City of the Ladies. And the 2 main points are, 1, society is built on patriarchal systems, and 2, patriarchy is wrong. Had you ever heard of Christine de Pisan? I hadn't, but it was Pisan who launched the Querelle des Femmes, which paved the way for women in Europe to think critically about gender for the next centuries, preparing the way for Mary Wollstonecraft. My son once pointed out that the name Mary Wollstonecraft sounds like a Minecraft character. You might know her because she's the mother of Mary Shelley, who wrote the book Frankenstein. The truth is, though, that Mary Wollstonecraft was a philosopher and writer who finally broke the cycle of reinventing the wheel and enabled women to build upon prior women's knowledge. Mary Wollstonecraft was born in London in 1759. Her education was somewhat haphazard, which was not uncommon for a woman of her social class, but she talked to people a lot and she read a lot. And in her early adulthood, she quit her job as a governess to become a full-time author. This was a radical choice, since at the time, few women could support themselves by writing. Let's be honest, that's still a risky choice.
I don't want to freak you out, but I think that I may be the voice of my generation.
The French Revolution was underway, and the English were watching it with careful attention. In fact, Wollstonecraft was in Paris and saw Louis XVI being taken to get beheaded. She said she cried when she watched the coach go by. She wrote an essay supporting the revolution and became famous overnight. But it was her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, that made the greatest impact. Wollstonecraft does several mightily impactful things with her book. Here are the 4 main points. First, she takes on the famous philosopher and famed public intellectual Jean-Jacques Rousseau, sparring with him over his claims that women are born to serve men. Second, she argues that if women are inferior to men, it's only because they haven't been given the opportunities to develop the way men have. Third, she claims that women are accused of being frivolous and shallow, only concerned with beauty, but they're taught from the time that they're babies that their worth is their beauty, and then they're mocked and scorned for it. Still true. And fourth, she argues that women need to be educated and to be able to make their own money, because when women are dependent on men for their livelihood, they are in an incredibly vulnerable position if those men leave them. I don't know about you, but I could relate to every single one of these points, which were written 230 years ago. For example, I still notice that from the time they're toddlers, girls tend to be praised for how they look, and boys tend to be praised for what they do. Girls often then grow up to value themselves for how they look, pouring money and precious hours of their lives into the beauty industry. I see women completely dependent on their husbands and completely unprepared for adult life. And in fields where women don't perform at the same level as men, they're told that it's because women aren't as smart or as capable as men are, when historically they haven't had the encouragement and the support that boys have had. So how could they perform at the same level? So many of the themes in the work of Hildegard von Bingen, Christine de Pisan, and Mary Wollstonecraft were topics that I wrote about in my own journal. I grieve as I consider how much anguish I could have avoided if I had known about these women. But I know about them now. And now, so do you. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help people find our work.